Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we could go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we're both sober and happy. Today I want to explore something that affects many people in recovery: worrying too much. For those of us on this journey, worrying can be a significant barrier to finding happiness and peace in sobriety. But here's the thing. Worry doesn't just steal our happiness. It often steals our progress, energy, and dreams. So today we're going to tackle the importance of worrying less and living more, especially in recovery. So buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. Let's start by defining worry. In simple terms, worry is fear projected into the future. It's those negative mental pictures we paint in our heads that make everything seem worse than it really is. For many of us, addiction was often tied to numbing this worry, whether it was worrying about the future, our relationships, our past, or even our day-to-day stress. But in recovery, we no longer have that same escape route, so those old worries can resurface and, if left unaddressed, can create roadblocks on our recovery journey. Imagine you're on a long road trip. You know where you're headed, but suddenly you start to worry. What if the car breaks down? What if the tires blow out? What if we crash? Now, it's reasonable to be prepared and take precautions, but if you let those worries dominate your thoughts, you stop enjoying the journey. You're no longer focused on the destination or the beautiful scenery passing by. You're fixated on everything that could go wrong. That's what worry does in recovery. It robs us of living in the moment and focusing on the progress we've made. Instead, we become obsessed with what could happen, causing us to spiral into anxiety or even relapse. So how do we combat worry? The first step is to recognize it for what it is, most often a mental distortion of reality. It's like watching a bad movie in your head, one where everything goes wrong. Worry magnifies our problem and distorts our view of what's actually happening. For example, you might worry about relapse to the point where it feels inevitable, even if you've been doing great. It's important to step back and ask yourself, what are the facts? The next step is to make a conscious decision to let go of unnecessary worry. Now, what do I consider unnecessary worry? The first is worrying about every potential outcome of something in the future. This usually happens when we're going into a situation with many unknowns. It's natural to want to prepare for those unknowns, and preparation can be good, but it could also quickly become an unnecessary worry if we're not careful. I know when I was newly sober, this often happened if I was going into a situation where I knew I was going to be around alcohol. I would think about what to say when someone offered me a drink. I would run through many of the excuses I'd been taught and which one to use. Then I would walk myself through imaginary conversations in my head and think of all the ways they could go wrong and what I would need to do. Then I would think of every worst case scenario. What if they found out my excuse is a lie? I would be exposed as an alcoholic. People would judge me, and they would think that I'm no fun because I don't drink. They won't want to hang out with me, and I'll spend most of the night next to the food table snacking and looking at my phone, and they will never invite me back. Now, you could see how quickly I went from being prepared on how to respond to being offered to a drink to going down a rabbit hole of so much worry that there was a good chance I was going to talk myself out of going before the day of the event even came. In reality, in all these situations, when offered a drink, I find it's best to just say no thank you. There is less to worry about when I don't have to keep excuses straight. If someone asks why, I'm completely honest. That takes the worry out of people finding out that I was not honest somewhere down the line. When I was new in sobriety, I also made sure to have a safe exit plan if things got uncomfortable and let a few people in my support group know I might need to call them if things got difficult. Beyond those few points of helpful preparation, everything else is just unnecessary worry and is going to suck all the joy out of the event I was going to. The next category of unnecessary worry is worrying about things we have absolutely no control over. These are things that may or may not happen, but no amount of preparation would change whether it actually happens. I was in elementary school in the 80s during a time where there was a lot of concern about a potential nuclear war with the Soviet Union. I remember constantly having to do what they called duck and cover drills in our classrooms. Basically, if we were hit with a nuclear bomb, we were supposed to hide under our desks and cover our heads. We practiced this drill weekly. Now, this technique not only does not prevent nuclear war, but it would also be completely useless in protecting us kids in the case of an actual nuclear attack. The only thing it was effective at was making all of us kids constantly worry about dying from a nuclear attack. Now, this is a pretty extreme example, but ask yourself, how many things that you have no control over the outcome are you wasting your precious energy worrying about? Why let it drain you? Think about all the energy you spend worrying, energy that could be spent on living, enjoying life, or working towards your goals. Think about how often worry prevents you from becoming the person you're meant to be in sobriety. Worry is not only about potential relapse, it's about doubting our ability to live fully in recovery. It's that voice in your head telling you, what if I can't do this? What if I'm not good enough? But here's the truth. You don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to have all the answers right now. It's about progress, not perfection. Worry is simply undue concern that takes up too much of your mental and emotional time. It's like trying to fix a car that isn't broken. Why waste the energy? In recovery, there will be tough seasons. Sometimes you'll face a winter when everything feels bleak and worry creeps in. But just as winter is followed by spring, the tough times don't last forever. Worry makes us think that the darkness is permanent, but it never is. Recovery is about growth, and growth happens in cycles. The bad times will make way for the good as long as we stay focused and keep moving forward. Now, I can't talk about worrying on this podcast without mentioning that much of the focus in recovery is around the fear of relapse. Early in my recovery, I was absolutely paranoid that I was going to relapse. The end of my drinking was a very dark place that I'm not sure I would survive going back to. After rehab, the first 5 years of my recovery was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the talk about the dangers were in every meeting, and I paid close attention. Someone would tell a story about going on a cruise after they've been sober for many years and drinking, and I would add it to my list of things I can't do. No cruises for me. Someone went to a concert and ended up drunk. No concerts for me. The talk was constantly about the dangers and how if we weren't always hyper-vigilant, we would eventually give in to the temptation and drink again. There was even an old-timer that would always say that alcohol was hiding in the bushes, doing push-ups and getting stronger every day. And the second we let our guard down, we'd be confronted by an even stronger temptation that we had before, and we would be doomed. We had to stay alert to the dangers of alcohol constantly, he said. So I constantly worried. But that also means that alcohol was on my mind all the time. I went from obsessing about drinking to obsessing about not drinking. But either way, I was still obsessing about alcohol. I remember at about 1.5 years sobriety, I experienced my first breakup sober, and it was a bad one. I was experiencing a lot of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, and just about every other emotion you could imagine when a girl tells you that she decided she'd rather date someone else in your home group. Now, the thought of drinking did not cross my mind until I started remembering all the stories people told about drinking after a breakup as a warning as why not to date early in sobriety. Then, a single thought popped into my head. What if I end up drinking over this? I didn't have a craving to drink at that moment. In fact, I hadn't even had one in a while. I just had a thought that turned into a worry, and when I let it run wild, it was all I could think about for days. The worry kept growing. Thoughts of how so many people drink after a breakup that it must be impossible to survive one without relapsing were constantly on my mind. And within a week, I found myself in a parking lot of a liquor store fighting the urge to walk in. It wasn't the breakup that led me there. It was the years of fear being reinforced into me that created the worry that eventually convinced me that relapse was inevitable. Luckily, I was able to pause and evaluate the situation for what it was at that point instead of focusing on the fear of relapsing that had been instilled in me. I reminded myself that I'd already been through challenging times while sober, including being with my father when he died just a month before. I reminded myself that if I could get through that, I could get through a breakup. Just because other people have relapsed after a breakup didn't mean I would. It was my life and my choice. And I made the choice to pull out of that parking lot, call a friend, and get the extra support I needed to get through that situation. Once I stopped worrying about everything that might happen, I was able to start focusing on the positive actions I could take to move forward. The best way to overcome worry is to fill your life with positive action. Just like a garden, the weeds of worry could take over if you don't tend to your mind. But the more you plant positive seeds, things like gratitude, healthy habits, and supporting relationships, the more you'll crowd out those weeds. Focus on what you can control, your daily actions, your mindset, and your growth. As you do this, you'll find that worry takes up less and less space in your life. Finally, remember this: worry could only take over if you let it. You have the power to decide what you focus on. You're not a victim of your worries. Just like in recovery, you could actively choose to focus on what's important: your sobriety, your growth, and your happiness. Worry is a thief that steals from your peace, but only if you allow it. So today, make the choice to worry less and live more. Focus on what's real, what's important, and what's within your control. You'll be amazed at how much more energy, joy, and peace you'll have in your recovery journey when you do. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Now here's your weekly challenge. Over the next week, be more aware of the worries that pop up throughout the day. When you notice it, write it down and then ask yourself, is this worry based on fact, or is it the fear of the unknown? Challenge yourself to reframe that worry into a more constructive thought that empowers you to move forward. By the end of the week, notice how much lighter you feel when you stop letting worry control your thoughts and actions. That is my challenge for you this episode. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Keep living sober and happy.